Welcome back. You're watching Political Exchange, where we continue our discussion on whether the social compact regulating labour relations in South Africa is under threat. Patrick, before the break, Chris was making the point linking the demand for wages, that it can't just be tied to inflation, that we also have to look at productivity and we have to retain our competitive edge. There was a recent finding by the International Monetary Fund that says, the South African wages are, it says the rapid growth of real wages in South Africa, which outpaced labour productivity growth in most sectors, was suppressing employment creation, and it was concerning the Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, COSATU doesn't share this view.
Not entirely. Of course we want higher productivity, and we will be prepared to negotiate. But what we don't want is higher productivity used as an excuse simply for shedding labour in order to increase profits, so that the workers lose and the employers do even better. That isn't in the interests of, obviously not the workers, but also not in the economy as a whole. Unemployment is already far too high, and if you simply adopt policies which lead to even more jobs disappearing, that is not going to be in anybody's interests, including on a strictly economic point of view, because it means more people who are taken out of the market, who've got no money to spend on goods and services. It isn't a realistic way of solving our problems.
But how do we tie the fact that so much or so large a section of our labour force is in fact unskilled? Mechanization, the innovations, our labour force simply cannot cope with those changes. How does trade unions assist in getting those things done? We know that there's a skills accord in NEDLAC. What role are you playing to make sure that the workforce that we have can in fact do the job?
That is one area where business, labour and government are working together, arguably far too slowly, but we've all recognised there's a huge problem which we inherited from the past of a lack of skills training, both at school and after school. And the employers must take their share of the blame for not instituting apprenticeships and training schemes of various kinds. But having said that, it's not the entire problem. Another problem is that skills are not sufficiently rewarded. That's at the heart of the rock drill operators' dispute. If you think about it, they are skilled workers. You or I couldn't go down a pit and do that job. We simply wouldn't be able to. And yet, when you look at the pay that they get compared to the chief executive sitting in their office, the difference is, I think, 152 times. How on earth can you complain about the lack of skilled labour when you're not prepared to give them any kind of reward for getting the training so that they can do those jobs?
Well, one of the areas is we need to try and achieve full employment. There's nothing better than if you can have people or employers competing for skills, competing for people, rather than people trying to compete for a few positions. And that is one of the fundamental problems that we have in this country, and we're not prepared to really deal with it, because it does mean... But
if we to get full employment, it means that we must have a workforce that is ready for the kind of economy that we require, the skills.
Funny enough,
employers are sitting on millions in cash. They're not investing it in skills.
They are investing it. They are investing it. That's actually incorrect to actually say they're not investing it. The right discussion, are they investing enough? That's the correct discussion. Not investing is deflecting it, because the biggest investors in this economy is the private sector. If you take a look at the GDFI spend, it's about 3/4 to 2/3 of the GDFI spend is actually the private sector spend in a variety of things. That you can look in the Reserve Bank quarterly bulletin. It's there for all to see. So not investing is the wrong way to put it. It's, are they investing enough? And when you've got policy uncertainty, when you've got labour uncertainty, where you've got the situation where the reputation is, in fact, I'm not worried about foreign investors, I'm worried about local investors as such. And you can see that in mining, manufacturing, agriculture, because of policy uncertainty, labour unreliability, you actually, that's where the start of the value chain is in the economy. And those areas have been static now for the last 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. And that is a serious problem. The other key thing is the only known way to create the jobs that we need, and that's 15 million jobs that we need. It's not 5 million, it's not 8 million, it's actually 15 million jobs that we need, is in fact through the creation and proliferation of small business. And that, you'll find that small business is less dependent on skills and it's less dependent on infrastructure than big business. But of course, the economic policy is to try and get infrastructure and that.
So you're basically saying, Chris, that we've got it wrong, that we should actually be targeting assisting and bolstering small to medium-sized enterprises.
Exactly, and the whole and the progression of micro to get from micro to small, from small to medium, from medium to large, that progression so that you've got that growth actually occurring is absolutely critical, because that's the way you can actually absorb labour and improve the wealth, and that is small business is always left out, and often it's the government saying, but we need a small business forum. It's not what exists that we, and that's the problem, it's not what exists that we should be looking at, it's what doesn't exist, what still needs to come into being, that needs to be focused on. You can't negotiate with things that still have to be, and we don't connect the dots. The labour laws, how can we redesign the labour laws, not to dilute the rights of the workers,
but to suit the needs of the economy?
It so that it's not so process-oriented that you need experts and that sort of thing to unpack for small business. At the moment, it's completely inappropriate.
Patrick,
completely.
Surely Chris has a point. He's saying that the idea with amending the laws is not to roll back gains of workers, but to tweak it in such a way that it actually deals with the reality of the world of work.
Lowers the costs of applying.
Chris, let Patrick
The problem
answer.
with Chris's argument is that he misdiagnoses the big problem that faces small business. It isn't the labour laws. That's an entirely secondary problem. And the labour laws are widely flouted anyway. The biggest problems facing small business is one, big business. We're a very monopolised and cartelised industry, and that's the main thing that stops them. I always give the example, if you see a new shopping mall going up, you can predict in advance who will be there. It won't be lots of small businesses. It'll be Woolworths, Pick and Pay, Checkers and so on. The other problem is the lack of effective demand. And I heard this from no less a capitalist than Patrice Motsepe, who addressed a COSATU meeting, and he said the biggest problem facing small businesses, particularly in the townships and rural areas, is that nobody's got any money in their pockets. As simple as that. Okay. And yet, big business say, oh no, the way to help small business is to push down wages, to weaken the trade unions. It's a myth. That would actually make it even harder for small businesses to get started, because people would have even less money to spend. And this brings us, as I'm sure we would inevitably come to the Lula question, because he recognised that problem. And he pursued a policy which in many ways was the exact opposite of Chris's. He increased social benefits, he established minimum wage levels, and surprise, surprise, it led to more economic growth, more small businesses emerging, precisely because people had more money to spend and were able to generate economic growth.
But surely Brazil, Chris, hold on. Yeah. Brazil is being held up both by Labour and some economists as an example to follow.
Yes.
And of course the methods that Patrick is referring to has been established, but Brazil has also done a lot to develop small business. Isn't it about getting the mix right?
Yes. What Patrick doesn't, he said they do these cut, slice and dice research on whether labour laws are an obstacle or not, and you say, oh, it only comes down X in the list because there's other things that are worse, and that what's not appreciated, it's, if it was only the labour laws, we'd be soaring, but it's not. It's this regulatory onion, the layers and layers and layers.
But isn't it also inequality, Chris?
Well, I'm not even sure what you mean by that.
If, for example, we empower small business, say, for example, banks relax the lending capacity and we give small businesses capital. The point that Patrick raises that people are unemployed, they don't have disposable income to actually buy goods.
I think
and that's got to do with our inequality in our society.
But what he's looking for a credit-based, consumption-led growth. We actually need a savings base. investment-led growth, because that's what gives you the additional capacity. That's what you actually need. Now, when you say, surely the bank should lend this, etc., that you put your finger on the next big point on how do you capitalize the 2 to 3 million new small businesses that you need. And you need to build up savings in the household. And savings in the household is negative at the moment because of a variety of things. Saving is, in fact, economically unviable. If you spend your money now, you'll get more utility out of it now than if you waited, because interest rates don't even cover inflation, and then the tax man is still there to actually grab. So tax on interest earned, tax on dividends earned, capital gains tax, transfer duty on property, death duties, all of these inhibit the household's ability to actually accumulate capital. And that's the source that we actually need. We're taxing our seeds, not our harvests. And that is a huge problem as you've got an octopus state that's got his hands in every single pocket possible to try and relieve you of resources. How do households save? People say we don't have a culture of saving and too poor to save, but what else are Stokvels other than poor people that's got a culture of saving? Give me a break. The point is that we're not connecting the dots in terms of getting this on. Growth occurs because of investment. You fund economic growth, and that's why you have to have the savings. Without savings, you cannot get it. It's as simple as that, and we're not doing it.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm sure we're not going to agree in this half hour. This discussion is probably one of the most crucial discussions that South Africans should be having going forward if we are going to be addressing our crisis of unemployment, of poverty and inequality. But that's where we have to leave it. Thank you so much for your time. Well, that's where we have to leave it for tonight. Join me again tomorrow night for another edition of Political Exchange. I'm Karima Brown. Goodbye.